Janlori?
Here I come, I'm coming. Could I indulge somebody, press upon someone, just we'll move this. Just. Oh,
Yeah.
I just need that, All right, wow. Thank you, John and Jack. Feel really good to be here tonight, and I just really appreciate everyone coming out on this insanely blizzardy night. And I thank Michelle Aldrich, who's not here, who's the publisher of Barlingo, an online art and poetry magazine. I love her, and she introduced us, so I feel especially grateful for that.
Yes.
And to read with Jack. So I've been to the Zendo a few times, and this last time was especially moving for the Oban ceremony. And if you've never gone for the Oban ceremony, which I don't know how you describe it in English, but it feels like a letting go and a sending away, or maybe in reverse, a sending away and then a letting go of those who have died. And it was especially meaningful for me this fall. So, start with that. So, wow, it's just been such a crazy couple of weeks in New York and in the nation and the country. You know, that fierce report that came out of Congress about how torture doesn't get us what we think it's going to get us. Maybe that will make some change. That was like a little bright spot, right? Somehow a bright spot on the backs of other people's torture. And so I just, you know, given what happened with Eric Garner here and with Mike Brown, I want to just start with a quote from, this is the tagline on the Wide Shores journal. This is a journal I co-edit with a few other people here in New York. And it's a quote from Gwendolyn Brooks, who's a poet who's long since passed, but she was a well-known poet in the 50s and 60s. And one of her poems that she wrote for Paul Robeson closes with this phrase: "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." And I just feel like, you know, that's a good place to be right now. And, you know, surrounded by this gorgeous art, which feels to me like about magnitude and bond. This is a good time to remember that lesson. So, shift. We're going to go to painting. Painting lesson. Don't watch your hand as it moves the brush. Don't think color or texture or line. Should I look at the horizon or my shoe? It's a different kind of blind, a way of not seeing to aid sight. Sometimes I believe that everything that happens is meant to be. But mostly, I think of brush and pen, how the hand moves without instruction, a kind of prayer, a chaotic incantation, how words sit up against each other they've never touched before. And this is for a friend of mine who's a painter who lives near us up in the country. I don't know if any of you know Jake Berto. He's got leukemia, he's very sick, and he has been for a little bit. So if he were here, I probably wouldn't read this poem, but he's not, so you just hear me, Jake, in whatever way you can hear it. For my painter friend with leukemia. It started in the marrow, and today the numbers are low. He's lost behind his house, now more forest than trees. The ground his only compass, he circles, searches for a familiar leaf, snapped twig, the chipmunk's perfect hole. Up is useless, sterile palette of sky. An owl taunts, "Who cooks for you?" And his stomach rumbles, makes moldy ferns seem savory, the collar of moss a beckoning bed. Why not lie down, choose this time, this spot? His feet, like monks with certain purpose, come to expect their prince, and for a bit he's calm, thinks, it's not absurd to circle. The way out is often through the front door. He's seen yellow leaf slip through air, a younger bud take its place, spent his life sure of some alchemy of pigments, trying to capture splatters of Eden, how sun slips over roots, flows over all that's gnarled. The tree remembers how many times it lured him to imitation. Innocent man, he never felt played, only crazed with aim, painting a cure for loneliness. So, I think it was in the spring, Sarah Van Arsdale invited me to read at her Bloom Reading Series, which was a huge honor, thank you, Sarah.
It was a huge honor to have you.
Well, no, it was really great, and what was really moving for me is she kind of had me be the warm-up to Tim Siebels, and Tim Siebels is really kind of an amazing, deep, ecstatic poet, and he read a few odes. And if any of you have ever read Pablo Neruda's odes, if you haven't, just go home tonight and just read them. It just opens you. You can breathe, you can see, you can smell and taste. He's really just tremendous. And he wrote odes to everything. He wrote odes to his socks. He wrote odes to basil. He wrote odes to salt. He wrote odes to lovers. Anything was material for the ode. And it starts with the salt or the basil or the tomato, and then it goes somewhere else. And I'd never written an ode before, but Tim had written this spectacular ode to his hands, and I thought, it wasn't even that I thought I'll give it a try, because writing doesn't happen that way for me. I just couldn't help myself. And I was sick at the time, so this is an ode to fever. You tentacled fire, pitch of desire, you spine-dissolving rampage, word mangler, barbarian in my bed. Nights in drenched dreams, your wave is all tumult and toss. You once meant a cool cloth, that cot in Grandma's bungalow, her hands laying an ice-soaked rag across my forehead, scolding you, rummaging in her trick bag for the hex that could chase your troubled ass down the road and into the creek, snare you in its chilly grip. Yeah, she carried magic, that voodoo love that saved me from a flaming end, saved me from disgracing the myth of a child's immunity. This young girl's shield against a wily heat stomping through her blood with invader hooves, a spirit hot with vengeance and shame, intent on making me sweat, hallucinate an ice block, a walk-in freezer, a lay me down in redemption's frozen lake, how the water will pop and sizzle, how it will hold me like a witch's forgiving arms, her ice fingers on my eyelids, my nape and earlobes and thirsty throat, under shoulder blades and on wrists and between thighs, where my waiting V hollers, touch me there, now touch me. And my toes, my heels, now come up to my hair, singed and smoky, curl up in these tangled strands, your arctic breath against my scalp. Now that is some true kindness. Oh, fever, look how you try to melt me. Look how you refuse to go. The ode. I don't know. I feel very safe here, so I'm going to read this. I wrote this today. That's crazy to do that, right?
Wow.
For those of you who write,
Yes.
this is just insanity.
You're amongst friends.
Okay, I know, I feel that. Thank you, John. You know, sometimes you write something and it's already there, and then it just is a question of putting it down on paper. And I'm not saying this is done because it's not, but in the early '80s, when I had moved back to New York, I hooked up with a guy who, yes, I have these weird little moments when I have a misstep, but this was this was a particularly good misstep, I have to say. As my sweetheart knows, I don't often make the good misstep. This was a particularly good one. Anyway, I was with a guy for a while who was shot by a New York City cop. And I've been thinking about him a lot, as you can imagine, and so somehow, I thought this was a way, it came to me today that I could honor him with this poem, so we'll see if he feels honored. For Trevor Campbell, New York City. They shot him in the back, right there where he stood. 2 white cops shot him 3 times, 3 bullets into his spine. They shouted no warning, unholstered at the sight of a black man standing with his back to them in the place they'd been called to for some suspicious thing. On the ground, his face pressed to the floor, he heard his girlfriend scream. She screamed, "No, no, not him, he's not the one." But he didn't remember that, only heard it later when she testified. He remembers a rivet of heat charging his back. He remembers words spoken as bright light, and his mama's face, his hand in her hand, and how she let him go, released him back to the living, back to the world of pain, to the world he vowed he'd never see again. The world where a black man is shot without warning, shot in the back without a second thought. He believed the millions would change them. He believed the city paid for its lesson with a pile of dough. That was 1979. He was 48. Sweet Jamaican man, put down your cane. Wrap those blue-green waters around you. Let the brine heal those holes in your body where they shot you, without warning, without a worry it would matter if they were wrong.
Wow.
This next poem is grief. I made a box. It wasn't heavy, not like you might think. It had a nice shape. A rectangle proportioned to slip on the closet's top shelf, next to pants, right against the wall. I did not fuss over it, or wail. No big ritual. And it too behaved. This compliant container, made from a cardboard box in the attic, with no memory of what it held to get here. We've been really lucky, Catherine and I, the last few years. I've been lucky for many years, but we've had the pleasure of seeing this thing called a murmuration. Anybody know what this is?
Birds.
Oh, right, and if you've ever seen it, it's just, you just can't believe it's real, that this is, some thing that is happening in nature. And we've seen it in Mexico, we've seen it in Italy. Murmuration is actually the word for a flock of starlings, and it's called a murmuration, right? So no one else gets to be that, just the starlings get to be a murmuration. And they deserve it, because they do this thing. Murmuration, San Miguel de Allende. As light sifts through April's dusk, flocks of thousands careen into a single being. See how they swing like a magician's cloak, such inky velvet stitched of starlings, swooping down and lifting up over the canyon's ridge. It seems it should be about sound, but then you realize it's something else, and the word for it is beyond what we can hear. It's spirit ash hovering over river, a mumble of moans in the air, goosebumped nights turned and tossed, flecks of regret troubling the lines. And it's the split self coming together, two strangers in a darking sea, underworld souls kettling up to taste the wind, a glimmer sign that all is not lost. So my last poem is another ode, got on this ode block. I don't know what opened the window. Maybe too big a window, I don't know. So this is Ode to Stretch Marks. I feel like if you read this in a nudist colony, you'd really be in trouble. I got my pants on. Ode to Stretch Marks. You silver spiders, you skinny legs crisscrossing my hips, you sneaky thieves of taut and allure. That's what you are. You snake dance over my belly like seaweed swaying in the brine, waving a sign that says, used womb, empty lot. You made your move, a hostile takeover, some kind of adverse possession. Multiplying like mice in the pantry's warm nook, blind pinkies nuzzling in cast-off hair, a delicate lick of pastry flour, a macaroni nibble, a universe of spindled beings making me their center, incubating in the belly's button, the shorn umbilicus put to work again. You are like that. Colonizers with your intricate bridges and side roads, a Baghdad cafe for all the poets to come shake it and sweat. You are a house party on hips, iridescent when the lights blow out, enough milky moon to shimmy by. You, teacher of this stubborn child, welcome to my body. I join the party. You icing on my cake, life's proof. Why did I ever fight you?